Moving fast is fun, which is why games like Pizza Tower and Ghost Runner are so cool. Earlier this year, I made a game that emphasized speed and momentum. I drew inspiration from a few sources of content that I loved: the insane speed of Pizza Tower, the way you build up momentum in Sonic the Hedgehog, and the fast-paced action in its Flash TV series, and more. I wanted to make a game that made you feel cool while running and platforming at high speeds. The character you played as had a high run speed with low acceleration, which means that the player would speed up over time on foot. On top of that, I added a mid-air dash along with a grappling hook. I had many other ideas for movement, but I knew I wouldn't have much time to do it all, since even though this was a passion project, I was still turning it in on the finals week at the end of the semester, and I didn't exactly know what kind of game I wanted to make until the middle of the semester. Luckily, I had spring break to work on this project. At this time, I went over player movement and refined the grappling ability. This game would just turn into another grappling game rather than a platformer if I let the player grapple onto any surface. To fix this, I only let the player grapple onto surfaces that were glowing blue. That way, the player did have a grapple ability, but they couldn't use it as a crutch to go over platforming segments. The goal was to force the player to platform through the game normally, while giving them grapple areas they could use to either get to higher areas or give them a burst of momentum. I played this game a lot during development, so I could be sure that it was a fun and challenging game, and because I was just having a lot of fun with it. Giving the player a good challenge to overcome is super satisfying. Games like Cuphead and Celeste come to mind immediately, and I really wanted my players to feel as accomplished as I do when playing these games. The only issue is, I had to do that with only 3 levels, which, in retrospect, is not enough time to give the player a good challenge, while teaching them the basics of how the game works. Playtesting like this would eventually come back to bite me later. At the end of the semester, I had a playable game that I was proud of. There were 3 levels you could play through, and there were even secret levels hidden within each level. My main regrets for this version was not having a tutorial, and the player not being able to easily tell where a secret area was. Later, after the semester was over, I decided to refine the game a little by adding a tutorial level that would tell the player the controls of the game as they were running through the level. I had some of my friends play it, and I saw them beat the game, which made me feel pretty good about it. I would then make a final update to the game, before showing it off at a local fair. This was a great opportunity to see what actual newcomers thought of the game. All this time I put into making the game, people would finally appreciate.
You made this?
Yeah, I made this last semester.
I'm done.
What? Why?
You see, when I was little, I broke my arm, and that hurt, and I thought that was the most painful experience of my life. And then, when I got older, my parents got divorced, and that was the most painful experience of my life. But guess what? That record has officially been broken, because you have created an experience that's both worse than my arm getting broken and my parents getting divorced. You are not meant to be a game developer. You are not meant to do anything in this field. You need to go home, wherever that is, because you are not meant to be here or do any of this. I need you to get out of my sight. I never want to play anything from you ever again. In fact, I don't even want to see your name on social media. It's that bad. No one is ever going to believe that you can do any of this. So go home before it's too late.
Almost everyone that played my game could not get past the tutorial level. They didn't give up quickly, which was a good sign, but seeing people try to experience the game and not being able to get past the tutorial, it felt like I failed as a level designer. Only players with a good background in gaming could beat this game, which isn't terrible, but it's not what I was going for. Celeste hits the sweet spot between easy and challenging. The game eases the player into the challenge, making sure the player understands how the game plays before throwing a satisfying challenge at them. That's what my game is missing. Among other things, like a gun would be pretty cool to have. Ooh, or wall running on grapple walls. Oh, and you can't forget about sliding. Huh, why not try again? With the knowledge of what I have now that I have failed once, I should be able to make a satisfying game that will be fun and easy to understand, with more dynamic movement and more in-depth mechanics. So, on November 21st, 2023, I started development on my newest game, Project HyperDash. And as of right now, the movement is pretty finalized. Since movement is going to be a big thing in my game, I wanted to dedicate a lot of time into making sure the movement was perfect before moving on to anything else. Okay, this is the movement I have, and it's oh good lord, that's terrible. I need to do some research. Ultra Kill, Neon White, Ghost Runner, and Super Hot were the games I researched. I wanted to see how these games went about doing their movement, combat, level design, and game loop. Ultra Kill is a good example of a movement shooter done right. There are so many movement options in the game, and the different ways you can combo your enemies is just so cool. Although it is easy to get lost in what you're doing, since the game throws so many enemies at you so quickly. And it's hard to balance, moving around to dodge enemies, look for hazards built within the level, and kill enemies that are attacking you. In Ghost Runner, the game starts off super simple to understand, and throughout your gameplay, the challenge ranks up slowly, without being too difficult or too easy. The tutorial is diegetic, which makes it super easy to quickly understand the mechanics of the game and start having fun. Neon White does a super good job at making the player want to retry its levels. And they're short enough to make you think, that was fast, but could I be faster? Which gives the game free replayability. And if your game is replayable and super fun, your game will have a long lifespan. Super Hot is not a movement shooter, but you do move, and you also shoot sometimes. Anyway, in Super Hot, the player is not so subtly instructed on what they're supposed to do in each level. The instructions flash on screen, and the player isn't immediately forced to start acting. The player is always given time to think about what they're going to do. It gives them ample time to plan and strategize. They are never blindly going into a fight, and I feel like that's a pretty good way of starting off a level, at the very least. So, I took my research, and after analyzing what made each game uniquely fun, I started with the movement first. So here's what I did. I took the movement I used in Lucid Space Dream, and recreated it. But this time, I added more movement options that I thought would make the game more fun. The grappling hook, aerial dash, and low acceleration with high speeds were a good base, but it often felt clunky because the depth of the movement was very shallow. It was like a kiddie pool of a movement game. What am I supposed to do with this? I then started adding movement options that made the game feel more fluid to play. In the original game, there were a lot of moments when the movement felt unpolished, like not being able to land fast enough, getting stuck on grapple components, and so on. To fix these issues, and to make the movement feel more fun, I added sliding, which gives the player a dash ability while grounded, while also giving them an option to dodge as they're running. The player can also mid-air dash into a slide to continuously rack up speed. I made this easy to do for the player by letting them hold the dash button in the air, which would immediately connect into a slide when they hit the ground. While running, I needed to give the player more options when they grapple onto a surface, because otherwise the player would just be hanging there awkwardly. I made a stop grappling event that stops the player from grappling once they hit a grapple wall, and when a player does hit a grapple wall, they're able to run and jump off of that wall. Fast falling. In the original game, I would be flying through the levels and barely touch the ground at times, but there were moments when I would have to refresh and touch the ground, either to get through an opening or jump on a platform, and I would have to wait a few seconds to do that. Why am I waiting in a game about speed? To fix this issue, I added a button for fast falling. I know this will mainly be used by players who want to get the fastest times. I can already imagine players pulling off quick inputs to combine fast falling with the slide dash, as I mentioned before. I also added a bonus movement option that goes along with the player's main weapon option, the shotgun jump. The way the shotgun jump works is, if you jump and shoot at the ground right after jumping, you get a jump that's 3 times your normal vertical. Even though it's a cool mechanic, I will never make this required in a level. This is just for those who want to break the game and move faster, or sequence break in a level and get a faster time. Yes, the player will have a variable jump height so the jump doesn't feel floaty. And yes, I added cutting time so the player isn't forced to make precise jumps at any point in the game. For those that don't know, a variable jump height is a jump that has that floatiness that a jump has while the player is pressing the jump button, but increased gravity as the player releases the jump button. This is done so jumping doesn't feel boring and clunky. And coyote time is the time when a player has jumped off a platform, but the game still allows them to jump. It's like a little grace period for the player. It's called coyote time because of the Wile E. Coyote cartoons, if you're wondering. Much like the player, sometimes Wile E. doesn't notice that he's not on the ground anymore while he's still running. So the animators comedically give him a grace period to realize his mistake. All these movement options culminate into a fluid base for a movement shooter. Movement options which I feel are essential for making this game. So now we have the movement part of the movement shooter. Next up is the shooter part. So I'll be working on the combat next and focusing on making fighting feel as fluid as movement. But that's it for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you stick around to see this game to the end. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye!